We know that yoga is different from other fitness modalities. Even if the only thing that you do is make shapes on a mat or even just do a bit of breathing practice, there's an effect that's a bit deeper than going for a run or, playing football. Um, there's more to it because yoga is not actually understood in the tradition as like a practice or something that you do for 2 hours in the day. You're striving to be a yogi, which means that your whole life is your practice. So if you start to look into the tradition, you can see that the practices that we have now, which are most popular, making shapes, moving, breathing, concentrating, they come from a tradition which is a lot broader than that and actually is underpinned by ethics and ethical principles. I wanted in today's video to introduce the most famous ethical principles which we see laid out in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Yama and Niyama. And as part of Patanjali's 8-limbed path, the Yama and Niyama are actually where you're supposed to begin your practice. Or more than that, they actually are the foundation for the practice. They underpin the practice and they inform how you're supposed to undertake the other branches, the other limbs of or aspects of the practice. So today we're going to introduce the yamas. I'm going to also make separate videos for each of the yamas and niyamas. There's 10 of them in Patanjali's system. And so that we can look at each of them in turn and see how we can explore the practice and our lives by looking at them through the prism of each of the Yama and Niyama. I like to think of them as like a diamond, that they have loads of different aspects. You first unwrap this diamond and you're like, oh wow, cool, look at that. And then you can see that there's lots of different aspects to it. And then you can use it to look at your life from a different perspective, to understand it from a new vision and be like, oh right, how am I living my life in an ethical way? That's a nice thing. So whether the goal of your yoga practice is just to feel better in your life or to achieve some sort of enlightenment, or samadhi or like liberation, no matter what you're doing, you necessarily have to work with what you've got, which is a body and a life in this material world. And if you have a body and a life in this material world, you're in existence in a society because there's other people around too. And so when we bump up against each other, that's where tensions arise and where a lack of harmony arises and entanglement arises, maybe the things that we want to actually liberate ourselves from. And so these Yama and Niyama are here to help us work with our earthly embodied selves and the lives that we live, which are filled with faults, fears, frailties. As I said, the yamas are powerful lenses, and the niyamas too, through which we can view ourselves and our actions, hopefully in order to bring them into a bit more focus and alignment. So today I'm going to introduce the yamas, and we're going to launch into a series of videos about the yamas, and then we'll look at the niyamas. So what does this mean? Yama, it comes from the word yam, to restrain. Another way to maybe translate this word is observances. I always think of it as ethical principles, and the yama, as opposed to the niyama, are more about ethical principles with regard to other people, as opposed to the niyama, which are more kind of like oriented towards yourself. When Patanjali introduces the yamas, he establishes the fact that they are central to the yoga practice, to yoga, to the yogic life, and they apply to everyone no matter what. He says the yamas are considered the Mahavrata, the great vow. They are not exempted by one's class, place, time, or circumstance. They are universal, which means that there's no excuses. It's not like, yeah, well, I'm tired today, so I can't do that. And yeah, I know I was rude to him, but it's because blah, blah, blah. No, you have to take responsibility for your actions no matter what. But on the flip side, it means that these Yama and Niyamas are there to support you in every aspect of your life. And as we start to look at each one, we'll see that they actually reveal a lot of wisdom that you can apply in loads of different situations. Like all of the yoga system, we can look at things from gross to subtle. So there will be a more obvious and more concrete aspect to the practice and to the perspective of each yama and niyama too. But as you work with it, as you start to feel a bit more stable with the kind of concrete manifestation of it, you can then start to work inwards, and it gets more and more subtle, and you learn more and more about yourself and about, you know, the interplay of how things work in the material world and the universe. So they are practices that really keep on giving. A word of warning when you're practicing, not warning, but just like pay attention, is that if you think, okay, done about any of them, it means that you have just stopped as opposed to like completed. None of these things can ever be completed because they infinitely lead to more and more subtle aspects. I have been through this myself where I kind of go, all right, well, I think I'm kind of like established in that. And then you realize that actually there's a lot more that you can explore, maybe even internally, um, as you go through these Yama and Niyama. So let's dive in. Join me in the next video.